Okay, so let's talk about Shane's character. One of the first things that stood out to me was how different I felt Shane's character was in the book versus the TV show. Or at least how different his attitude towards Ilya was in the book rather than the television show. In the book, Shane's character is a lot more, I want to say, aggressive, at least in his attitude towards Ilya. In the book, Rachel Reed seems to emphasize this dislike between the two of them, that it in fact is a heated rivalry, and that the two don't actually like each other, or at least, it's a performance that they're putting on for themselves, even, inside their own minds, until that realization, comes to the surface. Whereas I think in the TV show, Jacob Tierney and Hudson Williams collaborated on a change in the character that I personally enjoy. I think that Shane is a lot sweeter. In fact, I would say he comes off as a bit more of like a sweet bottom, versus the version that you see in the book. And I like that there's that dynamic between Shane versus Ilya, kind of top and bottom, or a little bit of like dom and sub, and that's represented perhaps mildly stereotypically by Shane being at least seemingly a little more into everything and being a little more emotionally attached and connected to Ilya. And I think that's supported also by Jacob Tierney's aesthetic choices, right? These close-up shots of Shane with, watery eyes, a lot of these sort of like longing looks that Shane kind of has and that he gives to Ilya, these moments where he sort of smiles sort of to himself. We get a better sense of Shane's internal monologue, which is represented through these external cues, right? Because there is no voiceover, where of course in the book you do get access to a character's internal monologue, but even then with the external cues it's still quite different. So for instance, like in the book, it starts in the fall of 2016 with Shane and Ilya hooking up in Shane's investment property. Like he bought this entire building to have no neighbors so that he can hook up with just to hook up with Ilya in private. And it's on page, where is it? I can't remember the page number, but after the two finish engaging with each other, Shane feels that, quote, "it was good to be reminded of the fact that they didn't actually like each other." It's in the very first chapter, so it's right from the get-go. So Jacob Tierney also played around with the chronology and the timelines of things. So in the book, this is how we filter the entire story through this lens, right? They start with a hookup, and then again in 2026, which is just a few months at the end of 2026, which is just a few months before Ilya's father passes away, and he gives that emotional speech, and before a couple of months before Shane's concussion, and he invites Ilya to the cottage, he's saying something like, "it was good to be reminded of the fact that they didn't actually like each other." So there's something interesting to be said about the fact that after 8 years has passed in this, sexual situationship, that's how he still feels, or at least consciously in his own mind, not allowing his subconscious to come through. But again, it was a pretty big change, and I like the version that I see in the television show versus the one that I got in the book. I like that there was a bit more of a play there, and I like that in the beginning it was Shane who seemingly was more interested, and then it just kind of switch. It kind of switches later on with Ilya being the one that's more emotionally invested and connected. Conversely, Ilya's character didn't change all that much, and that's for the better. And Connor Story did an absolutely spectacular job of bringing Ilya in the book to screen in an absolutely perfect way. The humorous sarcasm, Ilya's funny, right? His humorous sarcasm, his kind of domineering eroticism, he's a bit of a chaos goblin, and you get all of that from Connor Story's performance, and I absolutely love it. And that's very much what you see represented in the book. So again, with Shane's change, it kind of makes sense just to create that difference, that otherness, to play off of each other. And I think Tierney did a really good job of, making those alterations, but also deciding to keep Ilya's character very similar, and of course did a great job casting, Connor to play the role, who did a spectacular job through and through. In the TV series, Svetlana is Ilya's childhood friend, We find out this information in the scene where she accompanies Ilya to the grand ball that is being held during the Olympics, right? One of the characters says, ever since childhood, she's been dragging him around. Whereas in the book, Svetlana isn't even mentioned until page 186. That's halfway through the book. And she appears in a scene that was featured in the TV show where her and Ilya are in bed together, and they're talking about hockey statistics, and, she makes a couple of comments about, Shane Hollander and him being attractive and so on and so forth. In the book, Svetlana is someone who works at the Lamborghini dealership in Boston. And when Ilya went to purchase a car, that's where he met her. She worked at the Lamborghini dealership, I guess, as a salesperson. And so it's really interesting here, right? Because this is a very different character. I would say it's a whole new character, right? In the TV series, we're introduced to Svetlana when she surprises Ilya in his home, right? So of course they're really good friends. We don't know who she is until a later scene, but she clearly has access to his private space. He trusts her enough to give her a key, and is surprised to see her there because she popped out of nowhere, but isn't surprised that she is in his house. So in the TV series, she is a much closer friend. She's a confidant. There are scenes of them together in Russia. There are scenes of them together in Boston. Whereas in the book, she is of Russian heritage, but she is in America. She is not in Russia whatsoever. Whereas again, in the TV series, she is accompanying him to like the grand ball that happens during the Olympics. And she brings him over in that, I would say, memorable scene where he reunites with Sasha, his former, I guess, teenager, lover that he, engaged with, who is the son of one of the coaches. And, it's something that we hear about in the show and that we hear about and we hear about in the book. But in the TV series, that entire sequence of him meeting Sasha. Sasha isn't even a character in the book. So Tierney made up that whole ballroom scene. He created a whole different version of Svetlana. I would actually say that he created the character because she wasn't really there, and where she was in the book is completely different. Like, she's even described differently, right? In the book, she's blonde hair, blue eyes, so sort of matching Ilya, whereas in the TV series, she has much darker features, looks very different than him, is kind of the opposite of him. And it's interesting because I think that change is very important, because I think in the TV series, it sort of sets up Svetlana is this, I don't want to say substitute, but as, I guess, a stand-in for Shane, who is also someone, with darker features, right? So it shows a preference for difference. I don't necessarily want to say for otherness, but for difference, rather than a preference for, sameness. That is what you get in the book, because in the book, they're kind of set up as like friends with benefits. He hooks up with her. She's kind of friendly. And, the only other time that we hear about her in the book, at least, is when Ilya suggests that, he marry her for citizenship, for the green card. And of course, at least in the TV series, when that does happen as well, when he suggests that he marry Svetlana, we get that really cute and very, infamous, sourpuss face that Shane gives him. Like, don't you even think about it. Don't you dare even think about it. So the changes are, I think, really important. And I really like the changes that were brought to the character. I like that she's a much more fully developed character. I'm curious to see what they're going to do with her, with the character in the sequel. I think the actress did a great job imagining and reimagining and creating this character with Tierney. And I also like that in the show, Ilya does have a confidant. He does have that friend. There's a point where, Svetlana, I don't want to say checks, but sort of like acknowledges, that Jane may not, be a woman, may not be female, where, she says that, he's very lucky that, he being, the pronoun that she uses as a way to recognize that Jane, may not be, a girl. And so she's privy to his bisexuality. She's privy to his private life. And I like that he has that confidant, because it shows us a version of Ilya that we don't really get with him on the ice, or even at times with Shane being very guarded, kind of like very closed, that we don't see that change and transformation until that emotional speech that he gives to Shane in Russian in the tunnel. So it shows his ability to commit to people, that desire for commitment, that desire to, and that ability when he does meet someone that he connects with to hold on to those relationships for a long time. And it's nice because in the book, you know, Ilya doesn't have anybody. So again, I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in the sequel with that aspect of kind of his loneliness and that lack of friendship that in the TV show isn't the case. But it's nice because, you know, in the show, Shane ends up gaining Rose as a friend. You know, he has his parents there. You know, his teammates, he has closer relationship with them, you know, Hayden. So I like the change that I see, you know, in the TV show. And again, I like what the actress did as a character, and I think it's better for the development of Ilya's character as well.